Well, I'm here and I wanted to do a video in English and say something about my situation with these videos and the Spanish ones. Uh, I really started doing these videos because I was asked by a dear friend to do little radio programs in Spanish for Radio Maria Peru, with which she is associated. And of course, any opportunity to share, my biblical experience over so many years, etc., and spirituality was welcome. I knew, enough about Radio Maria, which is something that I want to talk about today, to be wary because even though I am not a great expert on the media or on what's going on in, I don't know if you'd call it the dark web or not, but in any case, I do believe that there's a rather organized, some sort of conspiracy. I could actually almost say right wing conspiracy, and I'm now being quite upfront to whoever is listening to this in English, to promote an agenda that is contrary in large part to science, for example, or to the truth. So, for example, I can't conceive of how anyone can say vaccination against COVID is a very iffy, doubtable proposition. We don't know enough about the vaccine yet, or you may have a bad reaction to the vaccine. If that's where you're at, information wise, again, we're living in two different planets. It seems like all the not only experts that people sometimes poo-poo experts. Anthony Fauci, I think, is a very decent, good man who has served for 40 years. He didn't start yesterday at the mercy of a politician. And if he, says get the vaccine, and if when you have a half the people not getting vaccinated, and you liberalize rules regarding masks and vaccine requirements, etc. And then all of a sudden the hospitals begin to fill up again. And all the reports are that it's 90 some huge percent of unvaccinated people that are getting COVID, especially with the Delta variant. I mean, if you don't believe that, and there are people who don't believe that, then we're in two different planets, and I don't know how any kind of coexistence is even possible. I mean, I'm hearing that um, the population that is unvaccinated are literally breeding grounds for the virus, which has free reign to multiply. And as someone who studied evolution back in the day, when you have many multiplications, procreations, you have the opportunity for mutants. Some mutants might be negative, birth defects, which aren't, you know, there's no propensity to survive when you have that. But other mutants are adaptive and enable the mutant form of the organism to adapt to a threat such as the antibodies of the virus. So that if you're not vaccinated, you're actually a tremendous uh, danger to the rest of the people who, with some minimum brain power, have listened and have gotten the vaccine. I had both vaccines. I had no reaction to them, the Moderna at Publix. I had a reaction to the second shingles shot that lasted, a day or several hours or something. So that I start right off with this topic of, what kind of people have these doubts about the vaccine. And I want to launch into a little anecdote that I used in the radio program. The reason I started talking about this is because my friend asked me to do these Spanish radio programs for Radio Maria, Peru. I had doubts about Radio Maria. I'm going to talk about them in a second. Um, my programs were mostly about the Bible, over 300 of them, because we've been in some sort of a lockdown for over a year, and I would do it Monday through Friday basically. So I have over 300 programs in Spanish. I started out with 20 minutes, and they asked me to do just 13 minutes. And I think I get views on these programs that I upload to YouTube as I do these English ones. But definitely most of the viewers would be watching or listening either in the audio presentation of my program, which I record, or in the Radio Maria Peru Facebook postings that I know my video program, the video version of my program was put. And sometimes I would see 147 views or even more, and the numbers are sometimes even larger. I'm not that concerned about that right now. And sometimes, you can't talk about the Bible or the message of Jesus as if it's pie in the sky up in the air, and you avoid politics because that's controversial. Some things you have to talk about, and that's what I want to talk about today. The unity of the body, the unity of the planet, the unity in truth, etc. Topics that I was hesitant to talk about again. I did a program on, is Trump or Biden more compatible with Catholic doctrine? But this is one of those occasions where I am compelled to speak out. I like to express myself, but it's not something that I rush to do because it's delicate, it's painful, and it's actually sort of a giving till it hurts. I was thinking of. But anyway, I did all these programs in Spanish, and sometimes I would probably push the envelope for what Radio Maria is comfortable with. Again, not having any idea, as I still don't, of who listens to this. I know it's not the stuff that goes viral. I supposed that the people in Peru who listened were very simple people, but apparently I kept it as simple as I could, and they liked it. But to get to the point, the last program I did was concerning the mass readings on Sunday. I did that for a couple of weeks at least in a row, where I would spend most of the week after Sunday discussing the readings from the Mass on Sunday. And not yesterday, Sunday, but the week before that, the second reading was Ephesians, the unity of the body, how Christ broke down the wall of hatred that divided the two, probably Jew and Gentile, and made one new person in his body. And after I had discussed that to some extent, I launched into this topic of the two different planets, talking about, again, vaccination. The same thing that I just said here. In other words, how is it that half the people almost have these ideas about the virus and hospitalizations and the vaccine and many and even climate change and all these things that are so at odds with the other half, basically, of the population. And the answer, I think, lies in not that these people have done scientific studies regarding the vaccine and have arrived at certain conclusions, but rather they prefer to listen to media sources that promote. I would start by saying they promote things that make us feel better and that have a lot to do with denial. So if you remove any sense of obligation towards the planet by business or any other type of uh, actors, and you say, oh no, this is just cyclical, you don't have to worry much about ecology. This is what, as I understand it, the president of Brazil's policy is. Downplays COVID, downplays the environment. You had all those Amazon fires. And the Pope invited Amazonic people, and that same crowd that's against the Pope and against embracing diversity, etc. And not that I think you should go down the checklist and knee jerk approve every single thing that the left says or whatever. But definitely there's a coherence to each of these planets. So one planet is going to downplay the planet's health. It's going to downplay COVID, and is going to insist that these are the restrictions on freedom. Wearing a face mask is a restriction on freedom. I left a little Bible group that met on Saturdays, and one of the geniuses in that group quoted Benjamin Franklin, whoever gives up a little his freedom for a little safety is worthy neither of freedom or safety. What a brilliant, wise thing to say, that if you wear a mask, this was back in the days before the vaccine was even available. If you wear a mask, you are betraying your free American spirit in exchange for some dubious safety. And sure enough, one of the guys who thought like that in that little group got COVID, and he says, "Oh, it's just like the flu, etc." I would speak to Italian friends of mine, in educated people, and I would say, "But look, the hospitals are getting filled." They go, "I don't believe that." A friend of mine just went to the hospital. "I don't believe the COVID virus." My brother actually sent me a video of this guy dressed like a doctor, maybe a doctor, saying outrageous stuff. The virus didn't exist. COVID stands for some plot to control people. And I think that was almost like, if not reaching that point, very close to this. The virus injects a microchip in you so that they can do more than they're already doing with the Facebook and the other media. So, I mean, these are all nonsensical things that it's to me. If I have to debate that with anybody, I refuse to do so. So, getting back to the Radio Maria thing. So, I did this program, and my topic was Ephesians, and I got into the vaccine. And my friend, who I could do programs on her. She's an incredible woman, brilliant woman, who happens to gravitate toward this whole denial, making up fake news type of thing. So it's not, you don't have to be a drooling idiot to believe this stuff, but you have to have a certain disposition. So she said to me, your program, your last program is not going to be aired because The whole vaccine issue is still being debated, and some people are very uncomfortable getting the vaccine, and they may be offended by your words. Uh, and furthermore, we can't even get the vaccine in many places in Peru and Argentina, etc. Many of my family members, and she's a very well-off person, have not gotten vaccinated, but some of my younger relatives flew to the U.S. to get vaccinated. Now her own brother, very smart guy, had not gotten vaccinated. I'm assuming probably due to inability to get the vaccine. But he got COVID, and it wasn't the flu. It was a bad one, where he was in the hospital with a tracheotomy and tubes and everything for 2 solid months. And my friend was, devastated, etc. So she knows what COVID does firsthand. But she's still fooling around with this vaccine debate thing, which leads me to another point related to that. So, Radio Maria in Italy, where it originates, and again, I'm not an expert on all the details, but I pick up enough to know the leader of this radio is a priest who, as I understand it, is very opposed to Pope Francis and who provides news summaries for his very devout audience, including a woman that I lived in the same rectory with when I was with the hermits in the north of Italy, who I considered to be a saintly woman, very naive, but saintly. And she sent me a message when we were still sending messages to each other. This was right after and I've said this in some other program, as I recall, but she sent me a message right after the November election where Biden won, saying, "Has Biden begun to wreak his damage yet?" This was before the January 6th assault on the Capitol. And I know I said this before. I took a picture from Italian TV of that shaman dressed like a buffalo or something. And I said, these are the good people that are trying to prevent Biden's damage. And Biden's damage, I think for them, would be primarily not criminalizing abortion. That's the way I put it. I mean, to say you're pro-life because you simply want to make abortion a crime everywhere in the U.S., that to me is not being pro-life. It's being pro-criminalization of abortion. Your whole policy position may be conducive to more desperation and more abortions than simply making illegal something that has been illegal forever without eliminating abortion. And I gave examples when I spoke about this of Cuba, and even when I was in high school, uh, there were reports of people that did abortions, doctors that did abortions. So just making it a crime. Uh, if you say that Biden's damage is that he's not going to make it a crime, and everything else that he does is irrelevant, or basically what the reason she talked about the Biden's damages was that what this little news summary from Radio Maria was sending to her was a totally politicized opinion disguised as very devout Catholicism regarding, basically favoring Trump because he's pro-life and then pro-business in many ways. That's what the ultimate puppeteers are interested in, the dollars and cents. They use the devotion and the piety to opiate the people into buying the whole shebang. And so you have this signing on to a whole denialistic, negationistic worldview, which flies in the face of every kind of science. And the very notion of truth is attacked. And without a common, planetary common ground as to how to determine the truth, there's no way you can have any kind of dialogue or anything. Let me give you one other example of this whole syndrome. So this dear friend of mine that I described as brilliant has or has had up and down sometimes a friend from her childhood who lives in Italy and who is what we call in Spanish a bread of God. I mean, she's the most meek and gentle and saintly. There are forms of sanctity, and every saint has defects. Sometimes they have grave defects, and sometimes they may not even be saints because of that. She invited me to New Year's Eve one year in Italy. I'm not going to say the city or any other details like that. And she basically said to me, and I'm not even going to mention his name, but indirectly you might be able to find out who it is. Bishop so and so is a card carrying member of the Communist Party. Now, I happen to know Bishop so and so, and I happen to know his books and his work, and I happen to know the community that he's associated with, and it's the finest community in the Catholic Church, whose founder was incredibly close to Pope John Paul II. And this community is as orthodox as you can get, at the same time being incredibly progressive. In fact, I'm going to say their name, the community of Sant'Egidio. They have a tremendous website in all the languages. Egidio. Sant'Egidio, you can Google that. And I know for a fact, I mean, it's like the earth is not flat. I know that. I haven't done all the physics. I don't know that. But I know the earth is not flat. And I know that this bishop is not a card carrying member of the Communist Party. But the question is, how did this intelligent teacher in Italy, married to a high professional, best friends with this brilliant woman, how can she arrive at the belief and state it, which would be slander in a court of law, that such and such a bishop that I happen to know is a card carrying member of the Communist Party? Well, that is all part of this mind bending, this slanderous disregard, or actually hatred of the truth that they become victims of by buying into these devout social media, more Catholic than thou. And so to me, that is a prime example. Jumping again to another example that I did in my program, I have a friend of mine who lives in Italy. I met her many years ago when she was very young. She has a nice degree from a nice university. She works for a very well-known journalist in the Catholic Church who is married to a doctor in Italy. And I asked this friend of mine, we're very, very friendly, have you been vaccinated? Oh no, I'm debating that because I hear bad things about it. I said, has your boss, who's married to the doctor, been vaccinated? Oh yeah, she got vaccinated. And I used that as an example of, how people's minds function, and I described it as the difference between relying on science, and in her case, she's not a Catholic devout. She's a normal sort of lower middle class, uh, foreigner in Italy type of thing. There's a lot of Italians too that think like that. I characterized it as getting your science from the street gossip you hear. And it tends to gravitate towards that low level. I've always compared it to, I eat at Burger King and McDonald's, and when I want to go fancy, I go to Wendy's. That's that world. It doesn't progress any farther than that. And I'm sorry to say that, but this was all that was going on when I was told not to do, or that my program, where I talked about the vaccine, would not air on Radio Maria. And of course, knowing all that I know about Radio Maria in Italy, and not knowing very much about Peru, but it's a branch of it, and knowing that my brilliant friend has very weird thoughts. So I had a little conversation with her. I said, "You're telling me that the vaccine is problematic, and you're telling me that, for example, Brazil has done a great job poo-pooing the virus and all that." He goes, "Oh, in fact, I just read that in Brazil there was no difference between the lockdown and the non-lockdown." So they get these alternative facts that is just incredible. But so I don't want to prolong this too much. I wanted to state that again. The reason what prompted me to do this program, after some hesitation, I said, let me do my morning readings first, and then let me even get into N.T. Wright. I am reading, if you see this on video, I'm on page 728 of N.T. Wright's 2-volume work on Paul, written, I think, or published in 2011. And it is incredible. I read The Resurrection of the Son of God, long book, 700 pages or so, and I said, I need to read his magnum opus, his great work on Paul, 2 volumes. I immediately ordered it, and I went through the first volume. I think it's 600 or 550 pages, and now I'm on the second volume, which will be a total of 1,200 pages. And he and I are on the same page 99%. He's more conservative than I am regarding, for example, Pauline authorship of 2 Thessalonians, Ephesians, Colossians, Timothy, and Titus. And I began my radio program in Spanish saying this, I have been studying the Bible for 50 years, almost. But I learn from N.T. Wright, and I am open to learning from N.T. Wright. I don't say I know it all, and the Bible is my bailiwick, basically. That's what I did it for 14 years in the seminary, and that's where I get part of my pension and everything. It's both, in every sense, my passion, my work, my vocation, blah blah blah. I've defined myself as a teacher in the church, just like the teachers in Acts of the Apostles, where they mention the list of there were teachers and prophets in the church, etc. And last of all, they mention Saul in the beginning of chapter 13 of Acts of the Apostles. So that N.T. Wright, I began to read a certain part of this book this morning, and I said, I'm going to read a little more. I'm not going to do the program just yet. I'm not inspired enough to do it. And I got to this point here, monotheism and the single united family, Ephesians. When I saw that, I said, that's God telling me, do your little program, because it was precisely Ephesians which resulted in your radio program, which resulted in its not being aired, which resulted in my responding let's say that I'm going to take 2 days off while I decide if I continue or not. And after just a little reflection, I said, this is a life and death issue. If I'm talking to a planet where they're debating the vaccine, and I have to censor myself in what I say when I talk about the Bible, because I have to make it sort of irrelevant to life and death concerns in the world, I said, I'm giving you some extra time. I'm not continuing with this program. So I was the one that quit doing the Radio Maria Peru short 13-minute programs. So I start reading N.T. Wright. And I'm going to read it out. It is hard to imagine a more emphatic declaration of oneness than the statement which opens the second half of Ephesians. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about chapter 2, but it doesn't matter. There is one body and one spirit. You were, after all, called to one hope, which goes with your call. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. So he says this is an appeal for unity related to the Philippians 2 appeal, which results in the famous Christological hymn, Christ, though he was in the form of God, did not deem divinity something to snatch at, etc. And the virtues called for there are love, humility, meekness, patience, making every effort to guard the unity that the Spirit gives, being bound together in peace. And he says that the multiple gifts which the Messiah gives them by the Spirit are to be the means, as in 1 Corinthians 12, not of a Paris corporate life. That's a 50-cent word. Paris, I suppose, means something like, fission or division or something, in which everyone's gifts are used for selfish and separatist ends, but of a common life in which, and this is where I find it fascinating, and I double check it, and it's hard to find something wrong that N.T. Wright has done. And I didn't initially begin reading him with that presupposition, but I think he's really, really good. And I would say he's a conservative, Anglican, etc. We should all reach unity in our belief and loyalty. He's reading his own translation, he's a great writer, of Ephesians 4:13 through 16. And in knowing God's Son, then we shall reach the stature of the mature man, measured by the standards of the Messiah's fullness, his pleroma, that they speak about in this letter. As a result, we won't be babies any longer. We won't be thrown this way and that on a stormy sea, blown about by every gust of teaching, by human tricksters, by their cunning and deceitful scheming. Instead, we must speak the truth in love and so grow up in everything into Him, that is, into the Messiah who is the head. Now you tell me if Fauci is a trickster. If you think Fauci is a trickster, then I go back to my old gospel discernment issue. Was Christ possessed by a demon or not? Is Christ casting out demons by the finger of Beelzebub or not? Is Christ cursed or not? I told my friend the other day in the conversation, I said, these things you think are debatable. It's like somebody saying, well, some people think that, yes, the Jews are responsible for all the evils of Nazi Germany. And so we need to face that problem. And I think we should put our trust in the Führer, Hitler, and his final solution. I think that is a debatable issue, etc. If that's what you think, I can't talk with you because we don't speak the same language. But I do think that Fauci is truthful, and these doctors interviewed on TV that they are burnt out and full of patients, and immediately cases rise up, and that 99% are unvaccinated. You and I talk to Italian people. I don't believe that's fake news. That's where we are. What do we do about this Ephesians thing? Are we on some common ground, or is everybody entitled to their own facts and their own Führer or leader who says Trump won the election? That the assault on the Capitol was peaceful and loving? It's a super serious issue. No, and again, I believe that the great masses of unvaccinated or even Trumpers or whatever, these are people vulnerable because they're angry and frustrated. And then they are easy prey to the real cynical manipulators who do get vaccinated, but then they don't tell you about it because they are using all this grist for the mill of their power seeking. That's really my deepest conviction. I'm ready to, a deep conviction that there's tremendous evil. I was just watching this Catch and Kill series on Harvey Weinstein, and I don't want to pounce on Harvey Weinstein, but what struck me was the power he had to, um, quash the truth against him for a very long time. The truth is finally revealed. There is no secret that shall not be revealed. I was watching the movie The Insider, that's from 1999, um, on the tobacco whistleblower. One of the brilliant jobs of Russell Crowe, not a great, I don't like him that much as far as a person, I don't know, but Al Pacino. But there you get graphic illustration of how power, greed leads people to lie. And the movie is very powerful in the parade of executives, a whole line of them before the Congress saying tobacco is not addictive. Whereas this super research scientist, played by Russell Crowe, was involved in all the research and knew that cigarettes were nicotine delivery systems meant to addict you. In fact, there were products in cigarettes. But my point is really how we have to evolve from naive positions, and usually only evolve by learning the hard way. The whole Hitler nightmare. Now it's illegal to even deny the Holocaust in Germany. Tobacco. But the power that greed has to lie and manipulate, and what it will do to achieve power and maintain it and increase it, is the whole mystery of Christ crucified. I told my friend, he said that I might offend people that are debating the vaccine when I spoke very strongly and actually said, whoever doesn't get the free vaccine is an idiot. She said, you're not supposed to talk like that. And I said, well, Did Christ say brood of vipers? Did Christ get angry in Mark 3 at the lack of response when he asked, is it lawful to do good on Sabbath, to save a life or not? And they don't want to answer that one, too controversial. Did Christ go around not offending anyone and retire peacefully to Miami Beach? Or did he get crucified because he had great enemies? And so you see how hard it is for Republicans to not follow their party and the real head of their party because they want to keep their jobs. And one of the biggest things that I have encountered is this idea that there's two sides. And I say, apply that. This is cutting the baby in half. The judge, Solomon, gets two women saying, this is my baby. And he goes, well, let's cut the baby in half. Or if you go to court, I was a lawyer, you went to court, you were owed $1,000. And the judge, in his wisdom, says, I don't think you proved your case. I'll give you $500. It's half justice. It's an injustice. The other guy gets away with murder. Comes out winning. You come out losing. So that you have to discern what is the truth, and the idea that this is being debated, the climate change is being debated, and all these other things are being debated. We don't know who won the election. The very attack on the idea of an objective truth is the biggest crime that has been committed by people who deliberately set out to do it. I'm not an expert again, but when the polio vaccine came out, was this going on? And did half the people say, no, we would rather get polio because we're not sure about this vaccine? Or in fact, there is no polio. Tell that to FDR. I read books and books on that, about him. You have to discern the truth, and you have to stand for the truth. And the worst thing you can do is to dress it up in religious robes and call this pig with lipstick a pretty girl. Uh, you have to be able to discern the truth. And most people would probably want to, but they are, as somebody once said to me, clay in the hands of the potter. They are being manipulated because, like McDonald's and Burger King, they appeal to the fast food crowd. And they find this big niche, not even a niche, it's a market where they deliver, just like the nicotine delivery, they deliver this, marshmallows or what, and with anger, it's like a sweet and what do they call it? The Chinese sour and sweet and sour. They deliver the perfect combination of this makes me feel good. I don't have to worry about the earth. I don't have to worry about the vaccine or anything. And at the same time, I can channel my frustrated anger at this changing, bewildered world. And there is a lot of BS in. I accept that the other side likes to BS quite a bit sometimes about many things. And, they are angry, and there you get a perfect storm. But the common denominator, I think, is that non-thinking. It's not that only the right wing fails to think. The left has a lot of knee-jerk people too. But science is science. And human rights are human rights, and studies are studies, and kindness and social programs and healthcare and reining in unbridled, capitalism so that you don't have to bail them out. like we had to do in 2008. All this stuff is things that a person such as myself, I mean, I listen to various kinds of news. I'm not hooked to one brainwasher. I don't think. I am convinced about the power of greed, and I can smell, I think, lies. If there's any one thing that I prided myself on, is the love for truth, like, that came from the Dominicans and even Harvard Veritas, and my ability to sniff lying a mile away. And with that little message, and the words of N.T. Wright as to unity, not being thrown about by every gust of teaching or by human tricksters, by their cunning and deceitful scheming. Again, if you think that um, this can apply to anybody, Fauci is a scheming trickster, then again, I don't know what common planet we inhabit. But I wanted to say my piece on this.